What's going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of Mi Casa Su Casa. Today, we have a very, very special guest. Some of you may know her from going in on basically any and everybody on Twitter. Others of you may know her from her recent smackdown that she gave on Fox News regarding the quote-unquote Bernie Bros narrative. I'd like to welcome to the show for the very first time, Katie Halper. How are you, Katie?
Good. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you for coming on. I know you've been rather busy.
Well, my smackdown, just to clarify, is, and it's hard because I am so associated with the Bernie Bros smear smackdown, but that was actually about Ilhan Omar. That was on Fox, but I did go on I-24 and say that the Bernie Bros.
Yeah, I think I was mixing them up. Yeah, right. The Fox News thing was, exactly.
But don't worry. So. I mean, it's totally on. The point is, I talk about both of those things. I talk about the Bernie Bros thing. I've been talking about it since 2016. And we can get into why it's still important to talk about it. And it's not looking backwards, and it's not relitigating the primary because it's still totally relevant, as you have pointed out on Twitter. But
don't you hate that? Why are we relitigating 2016, motherfucker? Because it ain't been litigated yet. What you mean relitigating?
Right. And also the takeaways have not been made. The important takeaways. The people who won't shut up are saying the same stuff, and it's so shameless because they don't even have the awareness and to realize that they have no authority anymore. That at least, especially if they don't say, "Okay, I was wrong about this." Yeah. But all their narratives can contradict each other. Like it was misogyny, and it was and we want to have Kamala Harris. It was misogyny and racism because I love how Hillary is an honorary Black woman or something somehow.
Oh man, don't get me started on that. Yeah. Because the Bernie Bro narrative, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it wasn't only limited to like women that were being ignored. It was also eliminating the faces of color that were a part of the Bernie Sanders revolution as well.
Because the narrative is that, and to be clear, I'm not denying that there are terrible people online who say terrible things, but there are 2 points. One is that they're among supporters of every candidate, and it's offensive for people who claim to be anti-racism and anti-sexism to present this stuff as limited to one sphere as opposed to a systemic thing that that exists
Hillary's
everywhere.
People were way worse.
Then that's the other thing. And then they have their own, which they never acknowledge, they never apologize for. The inaccurate part is, no, I'm not saying every person who said that they were called the C word by a Bernie person is lying. What I am saying is that we got called the C word. You probably got called the N word. And we never talk about that stuff, or the media
silly,
never pays attention.
I've been called silly Black person a few times.
Okay, yeah. See, that's like it's funny. There is a thing, I'm sure, like there does exist, and it's not representative, but there are these like white dudes who support Sanders who maybe are annoying and will like condescendingly point to Chomsky. But then there are Hillary people who are annoying, and like especially white women who will like condescendingly talk about how they're going to like protect Joy Reid if you come after her. Like they have a type too. You know what I mean? It's like the wine mom.
Yeah. It's the, she's protecting the status quo for us. So we have to protect her, especially since she's willing to sell y'all under the bus in a way like Nina Turner wouldn't want to, or Ilhan Omar, for example. And speaking of which,
that's what brings it all together.
Just published your first piece in Fair Media Watch. It's called "The Debate Over Labeling Omar Obscures Vital Debates on Israel and Palestine." Can you talk a little bit about that piece?
Yeah. So the title I would have given it, just to give people to sum it up, is basically Ilhan Omar's critics just proved her point. Like the attacks on Ilhan Omar proved her points perfectly. And a bunch of different things happened. One is that it's so funny. She literally said, and of course it's so meta because we don't know what she literally said, or most people don't because the media didn't bother putting that in. What happened was she spoke at an event last week and at Busboys and Poets, a bookstore in DC that has a lot of great events. And she was asked by the moderator, she was on the panel and so was Rashida Tlaib. And she was asked by the moderator, what can we do to support you because you're called an anti-Semite just because you criticize Israel? And she responded, and I'm just opening up the
quote,
the piece. Yeah. Excuse me. She responded. Fair Fair, where is it? Sorry about this. I should have opened it. Fair is a great place, by the way. It's a great website. They do really good. It's fairness and accuracy in reporting. They do really great work. Anyway, so, okay, I have it here. She was asked, okay, so the moderator said, what can we do as a community here to support you criticizing Israel for some of the war crimes that it has done so that it's not seen as you're anti-Semitic, because you're not criticizing the religion, you're not criticizing Jewish people, you're criticizing the government policies. So that was the question that was asked. And this is all on video because there was a Facebook live streaming of it. And her response was, it's almost as if every single time we say something, regardless of what it is, we say that is supposed to be about foreign policy or engagement or advocacy about ending oppression or the freeing of every human life and wanting dignity, we get labeled as something, and that ends the discussion because we end up defending that, and nobody ever gets to have the broader debate of what is happening with Palestine. And that's exactly what happened, right? Mm-hmm. She was labeled an anti-Semite, and then she had to spend all this time defending herself from that. And the Democrats, with friends like these, who needs enemies or Republicans, but the Dems.
Good God, right? They've taken more legislative action against Ilhan Omar than they have against the Republicans in the entire time Donald Trump has been president.
Yeah. And resolutions. Where is their resolution when Donald Trump refused to mention? And this is funny because I'm a Jew who always wants to remind people that it wasn't just Jews in the Holocaust. Yeah. I mean, they were the main act, if you will. Like they were but the Roma, communists, LGBT.
The Roma. Oh, yeah. Got you.
You know, but you got to talk about the Jews too. And when Trump administration, I mean, he's the worst of both worlds. He is hawkish on Israel and unquestionably supports their hawkish policies, but also dog whistles anti-Semites. So they didn't mention on Holocaust Commemoration Day, for instance, they didn't mention Nazis or Jews, which is almost always included. That's just one example. Or, you know, he downplayed the people in Charlottesville, right? They're good people on both sides. And anyway,
that's still one of the weirdest speeches I've ever heard.
Yeah. So there's a lot that they could have condemned him for. And also in terms of Omar, there's actually a Republican congressman. I didn't include this in my article, but named Zeldin, who is a New York Jewish congressman, who actually tweeted at her like, here's a message I got, an anti-Semitic. You saw that, right?
Oh my God. The most, totally out of nowhere. Yeah. Just tags her. This is a message I got. Which part of this message do you disagree with? All of it? Why are you adding me for this?
Yeah.
Out of all you got because Rashid. I mean, even if you want to say, okay, we both share, mutual condemnation because of our Jewish and Muslim backgrounds. So maybe we have that in common. And if he was being genuine, and but you could tell from the wording he was tweeting at her in bad faith, basically trying to spark. It was a fucking dog whistle. It's exactly what it was.
It was basically saying like, "Hi, you're Muslim. You're responsible for this. If you don't condemn it, I'm going to assume that you support it." Which is like she could say to him, "Oh, that poster of me, that 9/11 poster that happened, that some Republicans put up."
Yeah, West Virginia.
Yeah, in West Virginia. Oh, do you condemn that? Because I do. Do you?
Yeah.
That would be ridiculous.
Care. Oh, there was a whole debate about that.
If she did that would be anti-Semitic. If she asked one Jewish guy to condemn it, she'd be called anti-Semitic.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Islamophobia is so built into it that they don't even realize.
Literally asking a Jewish person, how do you feel about this? Would have been, oh my God, it would have blown up. It would. You know what's interesting? This whole dual loyalty idea that they're trying to, or they're trying to say that she's claiming, even though she never even said that. No. This whole idea that, if I'm defending Israel because it's the American thing to do, which is a weird association. I mean, we can go on all day about where it came from, but could you imagine if Ilhan defended and spoke up for Somalia in the same way that they do about Israel
and called people racist for not, or something, or for not talking about it? No, what happened? What's so interesting is, one of the things I quote is I kind of trace how the story went out, and Jewish Insider a woman at Jewish Insider wrote about it, and it was kind of more neutral about it. The headline was Reps Omar and Tlaib, anti-Semitism charges shut down criticism of Israel. And then when Jonathan Chait picked up the story at New York Magazine, he called it, hold on one second, Hawks. Ilhan Omar accuses Israel hawks of allegiance to a foreign country, put that in quotes. And so when Ilhan Omar said what she said and said, you know, it ends the debate with Palestine. After that, right after that, she said, so I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay for people to push for allegiance to a foreign country. So that's the only part that Chait talked about, was that one sentence. He didn't say, he probably didn't say the rest of it because he knew that it would have been self-incriminating, because he would have been quoting her, describing exactly what he was doing, which was conflating any criticism with anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And that story took off. And what's interesting is that there were some people kind of outed themselves, like Congressman Juan Vargas tweeted, Rep. Juan Vargas, a congressman in California, he tweeted, "It is disturbing that Rep. Omar continues to perpetuate hurtful anti-Semitic stereotypes that misrepresent our Jewish community. Additionally, questioning support for the U.S.-Israel relationship is unacceptable. Israel has and remains a stalwart ally of the United States."
Yeah, what the hell is that about?
I condemn her remarks and believe she should apologize for her offensive comments. Now, what was great about that is that he didn't realize it, but he was doing, I'm sure, like hawkish. I'm sure people like Chait, when they saw that, were like, oh, please don't do this. Because the whole point is, like, Chait is pretending it's not about the relationship between U.S. and Israel that he's condemning comments about. He's condemning anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And they're explicitly pretending, oh, debate about this is great. Oh, yeah, of course. Of course there's a problem.
That was literally the GOP's problem with Trump during 2016 wasn't that he was saying racist comments. It was that he was being so overt. You're like, you're killing us, man. It's not supposed to go down. You're not supposed to call them rapists. You're supposed to say, I mean, what we don't know what can happen when Mexicans come over. Maybe crime goes up, but I mean, we're not blaming on the Mexicans. You know, that's what they do. The whole Southern strategy thing.
Right.
And
or they do like with abortion, when he was asked what if abortion should be punishable. And he was like, yeah, he was just saying what the logical outcome of it is. If you make abortion illegal, it's a crime, then women should go to jail. But the Republicans never want to talk about that because they know that's that'll not poll well, and it'll alienate pro-life, quote unquote, pro-life people. But he just said that. Same thing with Saudi Arabia, when he said we're supporting them because we're selling them a bunch of arms. And that's why he didn't, punish them, respond to the Khashoggi dismembering. But there is that, because again, that these people are being very careful. When I say these people, I don't mean, at least call me self-loathing Jew, not an anti-Semite when you smear me. But these people, by which I mean Christian Zionists, Jewish Zionists, arms, weapons people who are Zionists for that reason, they're trying so hard to say, oh, we are not criticizing her because she's questioning U.S. support of Israel. That's not what this is about. It's about anti-Semitic tropes. And this guy basically, and
I don't think that they know what a trope is. Or they do, or they're ignoring it.
Yeah. And this guy who's not a Republican, which is interesting, was just overtly like, linking her alleged anti-Semitic tropisms with her criticism of Israel. So he kind of outed himself and a lot of other people.
Yeah, and it was like in the same tweet, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's just like you said, it's not that we all
nobody called him beforehand to let him know.
Exactly,
bro, shut up.
I'm trying to think what the equivalent would be with like a race thing or a gender thing.
Oh no, it would be like, I mean, we see it with Kamala Harris all the time, right? They will say, like, oh, talking about her husband or talking about her blackness is absolutely unacceptable, blah, 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 blah. And then they'll subsequently say, but if you vote for Bernie Sanders, then we're going to assume you're racist and sexist.
Right. Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No. You're not supposed to include the guy you're trying, because it's, you know how it goes. It's like this tacit tangential association or disassociation, if you know, whatever one.
Right.
You want. But like when you're saying this, we all know who you're referring to.
Right.
We know who supporters you're referring to, but you can't actually say that because it'll sow discourse and the conversation will go back to, well, he's the better candidate. You don't ever want to get to the conversation of policy or who's a better candidate. You just want to have people arguing about identity and race and sex and all that good stuff. So
it's the lack of it's the overt double standards that's shocking. And another one that was shocking is another thing that I quoted was this guy who had an op-ed in the Washington Post, which I don't know why I'm surprised because they're so bad. But a guy who, again, you're supposed to be subtle about this stuff, right? Like the whole point is you don't wear it on your sleeve. But a guy named Henry Olsen, I couldn't believe this. I mean, again, it was like liberal, quote unquote liberals, you know, or centrist and moderates. Like Dana Milbank compared Omar to Trump. He said she was taking a page out of Trump's book. And then
that would be like the literally total opposite of Trump's playbook.
It's so stupid.
He loves Israel, but hey,
well, yeah. I mean, he's saying in the bigotry style, but that's so absurd because even if we thought that was true, like the least generous read of her, right, would be that she's. And most people were like somewhere between like, oh, it's an unfortunate thing. Some people probably thought that she did it on purpose. But even that idea that that's at all comparable with someone who's enacting bigoted laws or trying to, is just absurd. Like they're so out of touch that they don't even realize what comparisons.
So I have a question.
This is totally hyperbolic. Yeah.
And this is a question I'll have to ask to me when we're talking about like a Kamala Harris or Obama, for example. So I'm sure you probably, do you find it offensive when basically people try and I guess, I don't want to call it G-check, but because you're Jewish and, you know, and so, you know, being Jewish sometimes is innocuous, but, you know, you make it very known that you're Jewish. And then when people try to correct you on what you find anti-Semitic, like in bad faith, like, how do you feel about that? Like how everybody associates your religion or your ethnicity to a state that is committing an apartheid and then saying you better support that or you're not.
Right. No, I mean, I think that like, it's funny. I said the other day that, you know, there's something that's anti-Semitic is, you know, one of the most anti-Semitic things is actually acknowledging that Elliot Abrams is Jewish. Like that's my point being like, it's not, I don't like that as a Jew. That's anti-Semitic to me. I mean, I'm joking, but I'm offended by that because he's so terrible. I don't want people to associate him with that.
I feel you. Like I said, Kamala Harris is running, so I deal with this every day.
Right. I mean, it's offensive. You know, there's a real, can I just finish one? I just want to read one more thing.
Go ahead,
and then we'll go back to this because this will take us in another really important direction. But I just want to make sure that your viewers know about this quote, which was from, and Olsen, what was that? Henry Olsen. And he wrote a piece that compared her to it's called The Steve King of the Left. But here's what was amazing. He actually said, history gives House Democrats a clear example of what they must do. This was before the resolution. Famous Roman leader Julius Caesar, because of accusations that she had tried to meet a lover during a female-only religious ceremony. Even though the allegations were never proved, Caesar said his wife must be beyond suspicion and sent her packing. So too it must be with the Democrats. If they wish to credibly maintain that they have no tolerance for bigotry in any of its forms, they must be beyond suspicion of such. They must remove Omar from all of her committees now or forever risk that bigotry will haunt them for the remainder of her time in office. So this is a guy who's overtly saying that this woman should be treated as poorly as Julius Caesar, like a dictator, treated his wife 2 millennia ago, and who was not necessarily guilty, but she was held to an impossible standard. I mean, and this guy is openly saying that. You know, that's something like we would say, like you're demanding that she be treated like you're saying it doesn't even matter. Like you're holding her to impossible standards of suspicion, and he's actually saying, yeah, we are, and we should, or Dem should.
Yeah, and it's whenever I saw that the resolution that was being created, like I almost fell out of my chair. I said, "Oh my!" I said, "Nah, no, this isn't real. This is a joke." Let me read this article real quick, and I'm reading it, and I'm waiting for wait for that JK. I'm waiting for the JK. They're dead ass serious. This is the most work that Nancy Pelosi has done in her entire career, and it is to shut down a Muslim Somalian refugee who disagrees with them. Black woman. And what's even more interesting is that these attacks against Ilhan Omar, they're calling her anti-Semitic, and Ilhan Omar is a Semite.
Oh yeah, well that's right.
That's like and people don't know it. They don't even realize. Like for anybody who doesn't know, basically anybody from the Middle Eastern area or even like Eastern East Africa, West Africa, and even some of Eastern Africa, like Ethiopia, they're dominantly Semitic, like they're Semites. Like Semitic isn't unique to being Jewish.
Yeah.
But the word has been co-opted
Right.
so that it only means that, and they can use it to critique anybody who is quote unquote anti-Zionist.
Right.
Like,
and then there is anti-Jewish, right? That's a thing. So, you know,
it is,
and you know, it's so funny. It's like, I sometimes have to be better about this because as a Jew, I can
most of the time, can I add just really
Yeah.
quick? I don't want to interrupt, but most of the time it has nothing to do with Israel. Like almost every time it has zero. When somebody's being anti-Jewish,
Yeah,
they're
truly
not like
anti-Jewish,
fuck
yeah.
Netanyahu. They're like,
If only, because a lot of Jews say that.
yeah, right.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are tropes. There are tropes, but there's also the truth is, Paul Waldman, who's pretty a liberal, but he wrote a great piece in this about at the Washington Post saying that she wasn't doing anything and he did it as like, you know, I come from a Zionist family, blah, blah, blah. She wasn't talking about the allegiance of Jews. She was talking, but she was talking about a double allegiance or dual allegiance that is required, ironically, by AIPAC. So that's a big irony, is that AIPAC does the things that fulfill stereotypes and tropes. They literally demand, but the only thing, it's no longer just a Jewish thing, because again, Christian Zionists play a huge role. There are not enough Jews numbers wise.
There are a lot of anti-Semitic Christian Zionists out there.
Oh yeah, like Pastor John Hagee, who Meghan McCain, when she was getting all emotional about this and telling the Black Jewish woman on the panel with her. I don't know if you saw that on The View. There's a woman on the panel named Sunny who's Black and Jewish, and was talking about how she experienced both racism and anti-Semitism, and Meghan McCain just had to like dominate the conversation and say how upset she was, and because she's not Jewish.
That white woman guilt. You gotta.
I know.
I'm so sorry. I'm coming to your rescue.
Oh my God, no, she was disagree. Yeah, it was like, and she's like, it's just that like Hadassah and Joe Lieberman are my family. I'm like, bitch, those people stood by John Hagee, Pastor John Hagee, who said that Jews like deserved the Holocaust, and said that the Antichrist is going to be like Hitler. This is kind of funny. The Antichrist is going to be Jewish and gay and part German.
What?
Yeah. And here's the other thing. They, according to their plan, Jews have to go, they like Israel, like quote unquote Israel, because they need Jews to go back there. And then only a limited number of us, 100,000, I think, and something, or 400, I don't remember, but a limited number will be allowed to convert, accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. And then everyone who
Jesus was Jewish.
I know, but no, we have to be born again, like legit born again. And then whoever doesn't do that will burn in an in eternal flames. Like literally, that's what they're
eternal flames that were just invented when the Bible was invented, because Judaism doesn't preach hell. Last time I checked, right? That's convenient,
right?
You know, it was even more convenient about that, by the way. Just as a funny aside,
yeah,
Jesus actually hated religion. He was totally against it. So you technically cannot call yourself a quote unquote Christian, because
I'm a much better Christian than they are.
By the strictest definition of Christianity, you can't practice religion while being a Christian.
Yeah, right.
It's funny. But
and also one other thing is about the double standard is that something I keep quoting, I'm still amazed by, is that Chuck Schumer at AIPAC said, we think it's our land. The Torah says it's our land.
Which it does not.
Of course, they don't follow the Torah, talking about Palestinians and Arabs, and that's why there's no peace. Okay, hold on. You're literally saying that the reason there's no peace is because a group of people living there don't follow your religion, which sounds pretty theocratic. And if a Muslim said something like that, like the reason XYZ happens is because they don't follow the Quran, they would be in so much trouble.
Oh my God.
Right?
That's the right wing's accusation in total, like MCSC, when they're critiquing the Middle East. They're pretending like Israel is the only democracy
and everyone else is theocratic and barbaric,
which is not true.
And living in the Stone Ages. Well, of course it's not true. But the irony is that they're saying something that, as you point out, would be used to justify the stereotype of the, unruly, the Arab you can't negotiate with. And
it has
he said this, and it's on video, and no one said anything. I mean, it got coverage in like Mondo Weiss and 972 Mag, but yeah, he said this 2017 address to AIPAC. And I mean, I wrote this. I said, this is beyond the usual Islamophobic representation of Arabs and Palestinians being unreasonable fanatics with whom it's impossible to negotiate. Schumer's using religion to justify an occupation and faulting Arabs for not being Jewish.
Not even using it correctly.
Right. Because they actually do incorporate the Torah, because Christians And Muslims believe in the Old Testament, and then Muslims believe in the Old and the New.
And I would say that Ilhan, if we're going to strictly speak, is more closely following the rules of the Torah than most Zionist Jews in the States, especially those like Chuck Schumer. I mean,
Right.
that's where, I mean, the practice of wearing the hijab or covering yourself and, you know, that type of stuff came from the Torah
Sorry,
first. Oh, you're fine.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, that's why. I mean, technically, it's strictly speaking, the same ones who preach against, you know, homosexuality or try to use the Bible to justify it. When they use the Old Testament to justify it, in the Old Testament, it also says that women are supposed to be covering themselves up.
Oh, right,
That's
and like you're supposed to be stoned for eating seafood or something, right?
Exactly. Yeah, same things like that. And of course, they don't follow. They pick and choose which parts of the Old Testament they want to follow.
Right.
But they completely ignore the
No abortion at all.
Yeah, where Jesus was like, "Hey, yeah, all that shit's bullshit. That's not even real anymore. Those are like your quote unquote kings and your lords and all of them.
Right.
We're asking you to follow those rules because there was nothing worse than death, and so you had to create something worse than death. So how do you do that? You create religion.
Right.
So it's just interesting to me how you see it twisted. I mean, they used the Bible to justify slavery.
Yeah, of course.
You know.
And this, so Meghan McCain, when she gets all emotional because Joe Lieberman is her family, you know, and he's Jewish. I just want to point out, Joe Lieberman called John Hagee. John Hagee had endorsed John McCain. John Hagee is a pastor who had endorsed John McCain, and then he had rescinded the endorsement, or McCain had to denounce him because it was revealed that he had said some interesting stuff, including Hagee had said, God said in Jeremiah 16, behold, I will bring them, the Jewish people, again unto their land that I gave to their fathers. Behold, I will send for many fishers, and after will I send for many hunters, and they, the hunters, shall hunt them. And then Hagee comments on this quote that he had said. He said, that would be the Jews. Then God sent a hunter. A hunter is someone who comes with a gun and he forces you. Hitler was a hunter. So he was saying that God.
What?
Yeah. Yes. And he then, and Joe Lieberman called this guy a Moses-like figure. There's footage of him saying that. So I don't really want, I mean, and I have to release this interview I did with Juan Cole, but you know, Netanyahu has been dealing with, you know, cozying up to right-wing anti-Semitic governments in a really weird way, in a way that, like, it's just the optics are not good at all. Because, for instance, with the Hungarian government and the Polish government tried to pass a law making it illegal to accuse Poland of having been complicit in the Holocaust. They wanted it to say, they want everyone to think that they had no choice. It was just German occupied, Nazi occupied. And Netanyahu like pushed back on that. And amazingly enough, the Polish guy pushed back on him pushing back. And there was this conflict because, you know, Jews who support the, you know, you can't, the problem is Netanyahu was in a bind because he constantly invokes the Holocaust to justify any abuses that Israel commits. Yeah. But then he's trying to saddle up with guys who are like not Holocaust deniers, but they're Holocaust like revisionists, I would say.
Yeah.
And it just exposes the contradiction, and it exposes how
hypocrisy.
Yeah, and AIPAC knows that Hagee thinks these things, and AIPAC, I'm sure, is like, this guy's crazy. We don't believe this stuff, so fine, let him think we were going to go there and then burn. We don't think it.
I think one of the craziest parts about Netanyahu specifically using the Holocaust to justify basically everything they do, you know, the Holocaust was actually running rampant in Africa as well. And people don't know that, like in Libya, there were a lot of Jewish people in Libya, Chad, Somalia, Ethiopia, and they were going through it. So obviously they were still going through it because and it's partially because of Israel that a lot of Jewish Africans still suffer today because they're taking out their fury on the Jewish people there. So they migrate to Israel. And then the government starts sanctioning stories that were lies about refugees raping people, robbing people. And there's like, okay, well, why don't you like them? Are they not Jewish? Yeah, I mean, they're Jewish, but that doesn't matter.
Right.
All of a sudden, being Jewish doesn't matter.
Right.
And even though, like, most Jewish people, if you're in Eastern Europe, a lot of times, weren't they converted to Judaism?
I don't know. I mean, that's a
because I don't know the history. I don't know the history.
more.
About
They had some studies that are more were. It was more Jewish men came over alone and then had kids with non-Jewish women than they had thought. So like Eastern Europeans are more. But then it's like I just feel I don't even know if that's the right framing because then it gets almost into like a eugenicist pissing contest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, but
like,
but there's
which
just
I think
like
is
every other. I guess it's just like most ethnicities. There's a I guess you could say racially there's a white side and there's a brown side or a black side.
Yeah, there is, and there's
and in just like every other
the
situation,
brown and black side, it's very different. It's like a an Iraqi Jew or a North African Jew is not going to be treating an Ethiopian Jew as if they were on the same side, right? So there's a ton of racism and
I would
colorism.
say that there's this competition. Yeah. Which with every Western society, unfortunately, is like this, right? Or any colonized society that is trying to emulate Western society, where they try to fit as much in with the white culture.
Well, what's interesting with Israel, and I talked about this with Juan Cole, is that there is a slightly interesting thing, and Ellie Valley, by the way, who's a great cartoonist who like Meghan McCain condemned for making an anti-Semitic cartoon. Because it was making fun of her. It was hilarious. It was making fun of her pandering. And you see her there. She's like has like Jewish like a matzo ball soup recipe, and like I should look for it. It's really funny. But I'm gonna look up right now. Ellie Valley, yeah. But he has a book. It's very interesting, and I kind of want to write about this at some point. But he has a book called Diaspora Man and Israel Boy. No, Diaspora Boy and Israel Man. And it's about how much like there's a stereotype, like there is a stereotype of the Eastern European Ashkenazi Jew.
Oh, this was just done. This is okay. So the Meghan McCain thing just happened.
You see it's so funny. So you see her, she's at a table, she has tears, and she has a yellow star with Judah, like you Jew, the yellow stars that they would make Jews wear in Germany. She's wearing a necklace with a cross. She's pouring matzo ball soup. Though it looks dry, it must be like a powder. She has a CD of Matisyahu. She has the Jewish Race Explained book. She has a book called A Christian Guide to Seder, Yentl. And then quotes from her say that the thing she said about the Holy Land, that refugee girl wants to exterminate us Jews. Anyway,
with the cross around her neck,
exactly
around her neck.
Yeah. So he talks about this, and it's really important, which is that there's this is a whole different conversation, but there is a weird thing with Jews and Israeli Jews rejecting, but they're still white, but there's like a bronzed working the land, like tawny, not scrawny, not pale, not Ashkenazic. They're Ashkenazis who went to Israel, who kind of try to, I don't know, it's like Netanyahu, or it's like
that's the best way. Oh my gosh, that's the best person. I was going to wonder if you would say that, because people don't know that Netanyahu technically is Sephardim, but everybody thinks because of his actions they benefit, because his actions primarily benefit Ashkenazi. Everybody assumes.
I think he is Ashkenazic though. I think that's the thing.
He might be mixed, but I've always read that he was Sephardim.
No, I think the thing is that it's so funny because I think that they have, Ashka, how do you spell that? They affect this, let's see. Because it's a weird thing where they both have a lot of white privilege, obviously, but they really want to distance themselves from the Ashkenazi stereotypes. And like, for instance, they don't speak Yiddish, right? In Israel, they speak Hebrew, which people didn't really speak. It wasn't spoken outside of, it wasn't a diaspora language the way that Yiddish was. I'm looking to see what kind of Jewish, I'm almost positive.
I'm looking forward to
his real name is like secular Jewish parents. What is his real name? He was in the military. He discovered he has a part Sephardi Jewish ancestry, but that means that in itself is saying that it's it's like he was mostly Ashkenazi.
Yeah. But from my understanding, he pictures himself as a Sephardic Jew, which is
weird. I know.
But I guess you know what it kind of reminds me of. So like, I guess it would be like kind of like how not to such a degree, but Kamala tries to pitch herself as like being black because it benefits her when she makes a racist policy or when she does something that will hurt the black community, she can say, "Oh no, I would never do anything racist. I'm black." You know,
she doesn't really talk about being Indian. Is that
which is new, by the way. That's new. All of her other campaigns, she focused on being Indian. Even had her aunt come from India to help her campaign.
Wow, yeah.
Plenty of pictures of all of them. No pictures of her Jamaican family.
Right. Yeah. No, he thought he was a pure, quote unquote, pure Ashkenazi background, but then he discovered there is some Sephardic.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but even that, you see, what's weird is that, and Ellie can speak about this as well, but there's this Ashkenazi rejection of Ashkenazi stereotypes of like the weak man cowering in the corner, while his, female relatives are raped by the Cossacks during a pogrom. I mean, these are pre-Holocaust things, right? And that Jews weren't allowed to have arms, so they didn't own arms. They weren't allowed to own land, so they didn't really work the land. They were forced into certain jobs.
Like the stereotypes that Jewish men or Ashkenazi men specifically are like effeminate.
Yeah, exactly. Effeminate because they couldn't, or that they're, good with money because their usury was prohibited by it was like they were forced into doing certain jobs and then they were faulted for doing them.
Yeah, I know how that feels. How that feels.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing. So the other thing that I wrote about at Jacobin was Bernie's Jewish identity. And it's an interesting identity because, and it's the Jewish identity I come from, which is it's not that weird. Like, it makes sense, but it seems a little contradictory, which is like, I went to a summer camp that encapsulates this. It's called Kinderland, and it was founded in the 1920s by secular socialist Jews and still exists. But from the very beginning, it had non-Jews, and the non-Jews were almost all black because it was a very anti-racist Jewish tradition. And there is Paul Robeson visited and performed there.
Is that where that whole idea that Jewish women love black guys came from? Because I didn't know that was a thing in New York.
I don't know. My mom did briefly date Marion Barry, very briefly. No
really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But the point is that that's a camp that there's a tradition because we see two very different and morally polar opposite traditions from Jewish persecution. One is they tried to kill us. That there's actually a joke. What's 9 words every Jew says or something? Don't make this joke, guys, unless you're Jewish. And I'm probably going to get in trouble for this. But what's 9 words every Jew says? They tried to kill us. They failed. Let's eat. Yeah. So let's say that they tried to kill us thing. That leads to two very different traditions. The one that sadly gets more attention is, I would say, the Netanyahu one, right? Which is basically they tried to kill us. And because of that, we are going to persecute other people, remove them from the land. People who didn't have anything to do with the people who tried to kill us, right? Because it's not like we kicked out Germans. Right?
Yeah, that whole thing goes back to the British Empire. That's a whole
exactly. That's another thing. So but this is actually so that's
by the way, just as a fun fact, I didn't know that Rothschild was Jewish until 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
I never knew because in college at UNC we had the #1 Eastern European professor in the world. And so we talked a lot about the banking industry and its effect on Eastern Europe in regards to the accession into the EU. And so Rothschild's name came up a lot. Didn't think anything of it.
Right. And so I'm in trouble, right? You're like, Rothschild this, Rothschild that.
Yeah, the dude's Jewish. The Eastern European guy was Jewish. So it was like kind of like, oh, okay, Rothschild. So this is just somebody who was singed into my memory.
Right.
And then I do a video. I was dating an Israeli girl. She was Sephardic. She was Libyan. And so she tells me her friend saw my video and was like, asked her why I was making an anti-Semitic video. I was like, what are you talking about? I haven't even talked about Jewish people.
Right.
And she was like, well, you did a video about Rothschild, I guess. I was like, okay, so what's your point?
Right.
Oh, well, he's Jewish. I was like, what? Get out of here. And then what was like kind of scary to me was like, hold up. So how does that mean I'm anti? What about my video anti-Semitic? I
mean, that's the thing is that people are. This is where it gets complicated. I believe that there are well-meaning, good faith, older Jews who heard Ilan's comments and we're triggered. Now, I have a real problem with triggering being one person's triggering cannot be, there can't be a zero-sum game of triggering and hurt and pain, which is something I want to write about. But the way that it functions, there is. So if I'm an older, now I think there's a difference between Jonathan Chait going after her and someone who, because I have to be honest, it's so sneaky of him because he said that she said allegiance and then it was a dual loyalty thing. And I didn't even check it first. So I thought that she had said something, unfortunately, that like, here's how I really thought it was before I looked at what she said. I thought, oh, okay, this is annoying. She needs a Jewish staffer to give her a list of tropes that to stay away from.
But then you go and find out she didn't actually use any tropes.
Right. I mean, it was so trope adjacent. And the bigger problem is, though, that like that there cannot be this good. You can't have good faith towards one side and not the other. So here's the thing. He did not quote her in good faith. And I want to say that like there are two issues. One is strategic and then one is moral. It is true that we have to make sure as much as possible, and I have friends on the left who will get mad at me for saying this, because they'll think I'm like conceding something. I'm not, because I'm 100% behind Omar, and she did nothing wrong. She did nothing wrong, and she's the good person in this story. She's the victim in the story. But we should be careful of avoiding certain buzzwords because we know people will pounce on us. And there are going to be times where they're going to pounce on us, and it's inevitable. Right. Mm-hmm. But we want to do that because here's the thing. We want people to attack us for saying, or Omar, or you or me, for saying Israel is an apartheid state. Because if we say that, and they then say that that's an anti-Semitic trope, then what are we talking about? We're talking about Israel being an apartheid state. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So the issue is forced into the conversation. Now they may ignore it, but if they go after it, then that is now the debate.
The debate is what is an apartheid, and by all definitions, Israel is. If it's, even if people like, you know what, it's anti-Semitic to say Israel's an apartheid state, we've forced that into the conversation, and now we have to debate what that is. Mm-hmm. So I feel like those are healthy. You're saying those are good conversations to have, versus like saying something like even jokingly, even though she like, first of all, I found it very clever when she said all about the Benjamins. I felt like as a hip hop head and as a person who appreciates metaphors and the whole double entendre of the whole thing, it was really a triple entendre.
I didn't know that Jay-Z's song had some anti-Semitic lyrics in it. I didn't know that.
I don't know if that was actually. I think he was actually celebrating like he talks about the cohesiveness of Jewish people all the time and how it should be admired. Actually,
like a mafia or something, maybe. But again, let's say that like I'm just being and there is this where people are like, Katie, don't put your energy in this. What I'm saying is like we need to be strategic, but in a way that takes like an hour, and we go through all. Maybe I was thinking I should make a video where it's like a guide to not triggering Jews over tropes and not killing Palestinians, like to kind of show how imbalanced it is. But it's true. I want people to know the buzzwords, and it's not in good faith. Look, my mom didn't know about the dual allegiance stereotype, and she's a Columbia, not to sound obnoxious, she's a Columbia professor, Jewish, raised secular Jewish, very smart, learned. She didn't know about that stereotype. So the idea that Omar would know about that. Yesterday. You didn't know the Rothschild thing. Now, I brought this up because when you said the Rothschild thing, it's true that a lot of people will hear that as code because it has been used that way, which doesn't mean that when you use it that way, which does not mean that when you use it, you're using it that way. And again, you shouldn't not be able to criticize Rothschild, but it is something to bear in mind, given that, and again, it's a strategic thing, given that we know they will jump on anything they can to delegitimize people of Israel, we do have to be. Now, I think it's great that she stood her ground on this, and I think this was a incredible that all these people have come out to support her. Sanders.
Oh, Bernie's support of her was so like poignant, because Bernie has a habit, especially when it came to Israel in the past, and it made sense because I think Bernie is somewhat naive when it comes to foreign policy, right? He's great on domestic, somewhat naive when it comes to foreign policy. So he's always kind of told that line like, "Oh, we have to respect the Israeli state," and then he would say whatever he had to say.
I think it's strategic, and my feeling is that he.
But it's changed though. His whole idea is it's like, no, y'all are full of shit. Like, I know for a fact that y'all are attacking her because she is Muslim.
Right.
Let's not dance around. And for him to have said that with no caveat, no well, we have
disclaimer, right? Because he's Jewish, and yeah, that's the thing, and that's one of so the other tradition. God, we're so discursive, you and I. It's like 1,000 different whatever. But the other tradition is there's the right-wing tradition that justifies oppression because of my oppression, right? Then there's the opposite, which is what I wrote about in this Jacobin article, which is the thing that's at my present at the summer camp, which is where it's my oppression makes me connect to other people's oppression. And my oppression makes me that much more committed to fighting injustice, right? So you have this whole, like, you have Jews who like vehemently oppose and organize against Israel's actions, and they kind of invoke their Jewish identity, like a commitment to social justice, or even if they don't invoke their Jewish identity, they invoke maybe the history of racism and antisemitism and connect that to why they don't want this ethnic cleansing to happen in Israel. Yeah. And Sanders has always done that. Now, Sanders gets shat on from every direction. There's anti-Semitic cartoons of him that people like Sally Albright, the bot of mass resistance, that she likes to tweet out. She actually made one into a moment on Twitter. Then he gets called a fake Jew. Mr. Dane, I don't know if you know him, another bot, totally heinous guy, called him a fake fucking Jew. And when that happened, I'm not
sure how you can be a fake Jewish person. Like,
well, I wrote in my thing, it's like how he means he's conflating. This is something that drives me crazy. He's conflating Jewish identity with religion. Yeah, Sanders is not religious, and there's an entire, like, for me,
I don't want to say it's anti-Semitic, but it's like,
no, well, it is in some ways, because
it is like, right,
how we identify. And no offense, dude, but like, my thing with Jewishness, like, I'm not going to tell anyone they're Jewish, but if you were Jewish enough for Hitler, that's me a guy.
Yeah, it's like, if you're, so that's one of the things I talk about with Kamala, right? So, or even Obama.
Yeah.
When people try to say, well, he's half black or Kamala, and I'm like, yo, if they walked into a room in Alabama, that's how I judge race, right?
Yes. Right.
What would his mom, if she was a white woman from Alabama, or his dad, or his wife's dad, if it was a white man from Alabama, say when Obama or Kamala walks to the room?
No.
That's a Negro. That's what they would say. Right. So therefore, they're black.
That's exactly it. So that's so funny you say that, because every time that's brought up, when I'm trying to explain that idea, I compare it to the Obama thing, walking down the street. Then there are all these different things where it's like there's colorism, there's like how the person's dressed, but that's different for now. As you said, it's the 1 drop rule, right? Now Hitler had a 1/4 rule, and it is different because when I'm walking down the street, for instance, like, people don't know what I am ethnically, but there was, generation after generation, your Jewishness was defined not by religion. Like, the Holocaust didn't kill people because they were religious. All you had to have was one grandparent who was Jewish. Judah Friedlander.
There were a lot of Christian Jews that were killed.
Well, and like Judah Friedlander has this really funny joke where he says that because his mom is not Jewish. And that thing that your mom decides if you're Jewish or not, that's also like backwards, and it comes from like not knowing who the dad was and some weird, like, I have a bunch of jokes about that. Anyway, but you're Jewish enough for Hitler. Now, I'm not forcing people to identify as Jewish if they're Jewish enough for Hitler, but I'm saying it is totally understandable that shapes you. And in fact, when Bernie was asked about his Jewish identity in one of the debates, I made a video about this where I did a mashup with him and Larry David, being asked if he was Jewish, which I'll send you. But when he was asked that, he said, my family, my father's family was wiped out in the Holocaust. I've been always been proud of being Jewish. And Jeffrey Goldberg, this awful Zionist writer at The Atlantic, right winger, was
I know Goldberg. Yeah, I know Goldberg.
He was like programming a note, like, public service announcement. One's Jewish identity is not defined by the Holocaust. It's like, are you kidding?
My God.
Like, your pro-Israel stuff is implicitly based in the Jewish state. That's true. Like, every person who defends Israel in a disingenuous way, or
we don't want the Holocaust to happen again.
Yeah, or it already happened. And look what exactly.
And it's crazy because slavery and Jim Crow and all that stuff wasn't that long ago. And although we didn't, there were a lot of slaves who were killed. Like, people forget that part too, because we get so focused on the labor part, we forget about the whole like cruelness of slavery and what that meant. And and it's interesting because you don't really hear, there are anti-Semitic people, just like there are racist people who will say, well, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
You should get over it. But the right specifically, and then the right-wing Democrats who justify the support for Israel using the Holocaust. It's all they say that we can't, and this I'm sure you can agree with. Well, we can't give reparations, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which I don't really want to go into that conversation right now, but it's like, why is that? Well, we don't know who exactly was a slave. Okay, whoa. It's not a man was a slave. The implications are still the same. It's the same thing with Holocaust. I tell people all the time, I say, I'm not against giving reparations to Jewish people. But like, why do I have to move to Israel, declare my allegiance to Israel, basically be a Zionist, if you will, or at least associate with Zionism in order for me to get those reparations? Like, and why is that?
That is why. Like, you're begging the question. But so Bernie has always done a good job of this. Remind me to bring up the Root tweet, the tweet about the Root that I got in some trouble for, but because I want to talk about it. Bernie has done a good job, a really moving job of, and the other thing is, sorry, just really quickly, like, well, he's done a great job of connecting. Excuse me, and not in a like, thank you. It's not in like my people were slaves too at all way. That sometimes Jews will say that. I mean, not most Jews, whatever. It's an annoying thing I've heard though, and I'm sure if you've heard it, I don't know if you have, but it would be annoying. There are two ways of comparing oppression. One is belittling and eclipsing, and the other is actually truly intersectional, right? So when Sanders was asked in 2016 by a Black Muslim woman, a student who asked what he was going to do to oppose the Republicans' Islamophobia and hate and bigotry, it was really moving. He invites her up to the stage, and not in a patronizing, tokenizing way, like most people. The guy is like real. Like, say what you will about him. Pick a lane.
He has his faults, but he is real.
Yeah, he's crotchety and shouty. Yeah, but he's not fake. If he were fake, he wouldn't be crotchety or shouty. So he had her come up to the stage, and he gave her the mic, and she spoke, and I think he hugged her, and he put his hand on her shoulder. And he said, can I get personal here? And he talked about the Holocaust and how his family was his dad's side of the family was killed, and how that makes him that much more sensitive to these things. And he didn't do it in like, and then some people who hate him will just be like, oh, you think you're comparing anti-Semitism to racism, which is like, no, he's not. And he's not, but it also is like, guys, you have to remember when Bernie was growing up, being Jewish was a different thing. Like, I don't face anti-Semitism, but when Bernie was growing up, people knew whether or not you were Jew in a way they don't today. They were paid attention to it because honestly, like
especially in Brooklyn.
Well, my mom, see, what's interesting is he grew up in a mostly Jewish neighborhood, but my mom, for instance, grew up in a mixed neighborhood in the Bronx. He was in Brooklyn. My mom was in the Bronx, and Bronx Irish Catholic kids would throw rocks at her and her brother, which is like, okay, it's not a huge trauma, but my point is that being Jewish then was very different from the way it is now. I never am reminded in a negative way. Every now and then I'll hear a lefty say something weird and anti-Semitic, and I don't hear righties say it because I'm not friends with them, and I'm not like lefties are not more anti-Semitic than right-wingers at all. But all these things exist everywhere, right? Yeah. Like that's how they function. But it is true. It's like, and then I get offended and defensive of him. I'm like, honestly, who are you? Like, what is your experience? Like, chart your experience with prejudice. Like, if you're going to question his kind of, and he doesn't do the oppression Olympics thing at all. He says, I understand because my family's.
He rarely talks about his Jewish ethnicity. And I think it's because he doesn't want to get into an oppression Olympics because he truly believes in the causes that he fights for and their uniqueness to their communities. But it is very clear. Like I tell this story all the time on this channel because it's one of the most powerful stories I've ever seen or heard about a politician. And it's because it was in such a really small environment, and it was totally unnecessary. Whenever I was in Fort Sumter, South Carolina, and I heard Bernie Sanders. Oh, I was in Fort Sumter, South Carolina, and I was there as a president of Carolina Students for Bernie Sanders. It was in a little gymnasium. It was Fort Sumter, South Carolina, so there was about 3 Black people in the room. It might be a little bit more, but the room was dominantly 50 to 60 plus white people, like 50, 60-year-old plus white people. And he sits up and he talks about the prison industrial complex, which is actually a phrase that I hadn't even heard up until that point.
Oh, wow.
Like, that word, that phrase, calling it that, they always say criminal justice reform.
Right. Yeah,
So,
it's true. This is 2016?
This is 2016, no, 2015 still.
Okay, yeah,
But this is 2015 still. I was about 25 years old. And so I hadn't heard it put like that before. And I was curious, like, why is he calling it that specifically? Then he starts going into systemic racism. And then he says specifically, like, because people kind of like started like, I don't know he stops what he's saying and says, if you don't believe systemic racism is real, you need to wake up and wake up fast. And I was like, Bernie, you trying to get a shot in here. Okay. Right. You see, and these are right outside of there, right before we go in, I'm being called a boy. I'm being told I don't understand politics. I should just stick to my politics, as in referring to black politics.
That's what they told Martin Luther King when he spoke out against Vietnam and about class.
Exactly. So they were all willing, because these are still Democrats. So a lot of them are still like, oh, you know, they just wanted to put me into that Obama boy, right, you know, type of box. But so these are the people that he's talking to. And when he says that, and then he's in the same speech, he's also talking about our Native American brothers and sisters and all that stuff.
He's one of the only people who talks about them.
What people don't know is that, and I've been involved in politics for a long time, so I know, I'm like, yo, that's political suicide in Democratic primaries. Obama didn't talk about black people in Democratic primary. There's a reason for that. So for him to have done that lets you know that his experiences are what shape a lot of his outlook on life. Even some of his faults, if you will, are because of experiences or lack thereof. But once he gains an experience, he internalizes it and it guides him going forward. And you can't really say that about many other people outside of Tulsi Gabbard at this point. So that's like at a high profile. Nina Turner, same thing. Just a few others at that high of a level of profile. So I agree. It's it would piss me off too if I was you hearing somebody weaponize your identity or my identity to attack someone who is genuine and ally.
And then they do this trick where they're like, what is it? They do this thing where they call him like a fake fucking Jew. And then people respond by saying that's anti-Semitic. And then they respond by saying, oh, just because I criticized Bernie, I'm anti-Semite. It's like, no, because you called him a fake fucking Jew. That's why.
But and like your definition of what a Jewish person is like, okay, so the Holocaust isn't like, first of all, I would say in the case of being ethnically Jewish, your parents, one half of your family being killed in the Holocaust because they were Jewish. I'm pretty sure that whether or not you probably that damn sure qualifies you as a Jewish person. If it was enough for you to get killed or potentially had been killed or never see your fucking family again, then you're fucking Jewish.
And it's also that shaped my family, right? So my mom and uncle, they sing like Yiddish songs. It's really sweet. And like they were raised the generation after that. So my grandfather fought in World War II. He tried to fight in the Spanish Civil War. There was it's interesting, the international brigades who fought against Franco during the Spanish Civil War, they came from all over. And the US, it was, my dad's uncle died in Spain. My aunt's father survived.
You talking about when the whole like socialism, like they were trying to.
The Republic they overthrew there was a right-wing coup against the Republic, which had socialists, anarchists, communists, liberals in it, and they called these people who fought against Franco premature anti-fascists, and lots of people considered the Spanish Civil War, which was from 36 to 39, a kind of preview or dress rehearsal for World War II.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that, and there is a tradition of radical Jewish politics and labor politics. And what's interesting is that the most common language spoken among all the international brigades, which is people from every country that participated, was, guess what it was?
What, Yiddish?
Yeah.
Really? I would have never known that.
And Black Americans and Jewish Americans were overrepresented in the Abraham Lincoln Brigades. That was the name of the American one, because Black people and Jewish people were like, oh yeah, this sounds kind of sketchy. But that is such an important example of internationalism, right? It's like, because it's not, this is sketchy, so I'm going to stock up on weapons, so when people come to me, I'll be ready. It's in another country.
Yeah. And it's interesting how, and it's, it's funny about that. I talk about that all the time. I say, when you've been through legitimate oppression, or your family has a history of it, or even your race, it's hard to sit back When you are connected to it, when you genuinely believe in the oppression that your people, it's hard to sit back.
And you see how it's connected. I mean, that's the thing. And when you see how it's connected to other people's, right? And it's not a zero-sum game. And
there are a lot of black people who are very, very like, when it comes to Palestine, I remember getting to this heated argument with my ex, because she used to be, I would say, pro-Zionist for the most part. Even though she was even considered leftist, which is weird in Israel. But we got to this really big debate or argument, and I was getting heated because she was not. I was like, you don't understand what it's like to be on the other side of the barrel of the gun. And that's really what it comes down to. I said, you get to travel the world, you get to have a great time and have it all paid for at that. I was like, do you not think there are little girls over there who want the exact same thing as you do?
Right. Who can't even
never get that opportunity because they're on the other side of the, you've never had a gun pointed at you because you are Israeli.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that type of, so, and I understand what that's like being a black man in America.
Right.
So that's it's so that those mutual experiences, one way or the other, like whether it's South Africa, how there was an apartheid there, and people don't know the reason that Fidel Castro and Nelson Mandela got along was because Fidel Castro was going through an apartheid. That's how he got his mandate. People didn't know that.
Yeah, because he supported them.
Yeah, that's the reason Maduro's so popular right now. There was basically
some guy was actually trying to tell me that Trump was a lot better than Castro, and that it was good that Gaddafi had been sodomized with a bayonet. Like, I couldn't believe it.
Leftist person saying this?
No, he was like, I don't even know who it is. No, he was not. So just really quickly, speaking of Rothschild, so you know that there's a musical called Fiddler on the Roof. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Right. And there's a song that's like, if I were a rich man, I would. Anyway. I'd have all the money in the world if I were a wealthy man. Oy. And it's all these, like, I would like be late, I would never work hard, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's based on a story by this writer, Sholem Aleichem. It's a pseudonym. He died in like 1916, but it's kind of stunning. This was written in like 1910 or something. It was written before 1916 when he died. And he says, and it's a monologue from a book. And he goes, if I were a Rothschild, if I were only Rothschild, guess what I would do? First of all, I would pass a law that a wife must always have a 3-ruble piece on her so that she wouldn't have to start nagging me when the Good Thursday comes and there's nothing in the house for the Sabbath. In the second place, I would take my Sabbath gabardine out of pawn, or better still, my wife's squirrel skin coat, let her stop whining that she's cold. Then I would buy the whole house outright from foundation to chimney, all 3 rooms with the alcove and the pantry, the cellar and the attic. Let her stop grumbling that she hasn't enough room. Here, I would say, take 2 whole rooms for yourself. Cook, bake, wash, shop, chop, make, and leave me in peace so that I can teach my pupils with a free mind. This is no life. Okay, then he goes, okay, what more do I need for myself? Now I can begin to look around the town a little. First of all, I'm going to provide a new roof for the old synagogue so the rain won't drip on the heads of the men who come to pray. After that, I shall build a new bathhouse. If not today, then tomorrow, but surely soon, there is bound to be a catastrophe. The roof is going to cave in while the women are inside bathing. And while we are putting up a new bathhouse, we might as well throw down the old poorhouse too and put up a hospital in its place, a real hospital, such that they have in big towns with beds and bedding. And I shall build a home for the aged, and then I shall establish a society for clothing the poor. But why only here in Krishleva, which is the made-up town? Mm-hmm. I would organize such societies everywhere, all over the world, wherever our brethren, the sons of Israel, are to be found, which means Jews, obviously. Mm-hmm. And in order that they should all be run properly with the system, guess what I would do? I would appoint a society to head them all, a board of charity. And then he says, sorry, this is one second. But in order to have everyone think only of the common welfare, you have to provide one thing. And what is that? Naturally, security. For take it from me, security is the want from the world. And he goes, even the enemies of Israel, the Hamans of the world, what do they think they have against us? Nothing at all. They don't persecute us out of plain meanness, but because of their lack of security. It's lack of money, I tell you, that brings envy, and envy brings hatred, and out of hatred comes all the troubles in the world, all the sorrows, persecutions, killings, all the horrors, and all the wars. The wars, the terrible slaughters. If I were Rothschild, I would do away with war altogether. I would wipe it off completely from the face of the earth. So what he's doing here is he even goes on to, like, say, get rid of terms like territory.
Say that last part again, you froze.
Oh, sorry. He was going from the particular to the universal. So he starts out in this poem, if I were Rothschild, meaning if I were rich, I would give my wife jewelry. I'd buy a house for her, have my kids married off. But then what would I do? Oh, I'd build a hospital. I'd fix the roof at this thing. Oh, and I'd make sure that I was taking care of all the people of Israel, the sons of Israel, which means Jews. But then he's like, oh, wait, I can't just take care of Jews because actually, like, we interact with other people in the world. So I'd want to provide security and means for other people. So even the enemies of Israel, by which he means he's probably at this point talking about the Middle East, because this was early 1900s. And they don't hate it. They hate, and he's like,
when was this post or the I guess piece written? Like what?
1910 or something. I'm trying to find the exact date, but it was, I mean, it's kind of amazing because this is this old Yiddish guy Yiddish writer, famous Yiddish writer who was writing it's like really intersectional. I mean, it's like intersectionalism.
Yeah, no, it's like
it's so ahead of its time.
And I feel like it's ironic because I don't know if you know what's going on at that time. You know what Cecil Rhodes is, right?
Who?
Cecil Rhodes. The guy the guy who basically started the war in South Africa and I'm sure,
Rhodes Scholar.
Yeah, so one of his best friends, like right hand man, was Rothschild, Lord Rothschild, and they had like this whole thing where they wanted to create an Anglo-Saxon world and blah blah blah. So this article was actually written. There's an article written in 1902, specifically talking about what Rhodes and Rothschild wanted to do. And they were actually in the process of doing it from I think he died in Rhodes died in 1902. Somebody else took up the mantle, but then they started doing it, implementing it. And then JP Morgan started working with Rothschild, started JP Morgan in the States, and they were bankrolling wars all over the world, starting with South Africa to see if it would work. And then obviously all that stuff started unfolding. But it seems like the guy is actually speaking like, yeah, if I was a Rothschild, this is what I would do if I really wanted to achieve peace, because that's what that original New York Times article was about. Like they were creating a society to achieve world peace. And it's like, well, this is what you should do if you want to achieve world peace. But it seems like the opposite is being done.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, is that the irony is that this was an extremely progressive post. Poem, writing. I think it was a short story. He is also a poet. That's why I get confused. It's very progressive, and it was turned into a song that's saying the opposite. This piece is all about, if I were wealthy, like if I were a Rothschild, meaning if I had a lot of money, I would take care of my wife, but then I can't just take care of my wife. I'd have to take care of my family, but I can't just take care of my family. I'd have to take care of the town. I can't just take care of the town. I have to take care of the
socialist asshole.
It's a social, but it is. It's basically a socialist manifesto, and it's an internationalist socialist manifesto, which was a very and I bring this up because there's something particular and universal at the same time about this certain Jewish tradition that is grounded in Jewish experience. But Jews were big in the civil rights movement. They were big in the Spanish Civil War. They historically have been very internationalist in their activism.
Yeah.
And very it wasn't called that then, obviously, intersectional, but they were the Communist Party had the Jewish People's Fraternal Order within it, and then within that umbrella, the
Black Panthers were very close to Jewish people in the States as well.
Jewish. A lot of times, the white allies and movements were Jews. I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back at all. I am saying it that to show that Bernie comes from that tradition, and that the tradition that's always eclipsed by, and that tradition is often eclipsed by this other thing, which is tribalism, which every other community has too. So it's not just the Jews. I think I have a bit of anyway, so it's the Netanyahu Schumer tradition versus the.
Well, I think that's why people like yourself are going to be attacked more, right? Because there are people that try to weaponize your identity and what that may mean in the grand scheme of their plans. And when you speak up, it says that's actually not us. This is what.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Like I said, it's seen it. And the only reason I keep talking about the Black community is because I see the similarities and the parallels so much. Like I said, the Black Panthers and there's no coincidence that like the Jewish people who do tend to serve an international purpose to pursue peace, like they get persecuted more, it seems, just like the Black people who are like that practice intersectionality too. Well, I was saying that it's not a coincidence that there are Black people, or excuse me, the Jewish people who serve the international purpose of pursuing peace, no matter what continent they're on.
Right.
Went through similar things as like Black people who were practicing intersectionality, because they always want to paint Black Panthers. Oh, Black power. We wanted Black, Black extremists. Black. No, there were white people in Black Panthers. And we all practice this internal social. We all practice this internalized or socialism and Jewish people were heavily involved in that. They still the Jewish people were actually able to a large part in the States able to keep on practicing that. But the Black Panthers themselves, because obviously it wasn't just for Black people they were trying to separate, but everybody who was part of that community. So it just sucks to see the identity weaponized like that. But it's good to know that we're ultimately on the right side of history.
Right. And they're, when they killed Goodman, Schorner, and Cheney, I mean, obviously more Black people were killed than white Jews. And, but they did, they're the three boys, as people say, and not in a racist way. That's like what the civil rights community called them at the time. 3 boys who were who went to Mississippi to register voters. They brutally killed them, Goodman, Schorner, and Cheney. 2 of them were Jews. One was a Black guy and the 2 white guys were Jews. So yeah,
that's wild. So we're gonna definitely have to continue this conversation. As a matter of fact, to let everybody know, I'm actually going to be interviewed on Katie's podcast. So make sure that you go follow her if you do not already follow her. We definitely want to try to get Katie on a lot more during this election cycle because I learned a lot today. I'm sure a lot of you all did too. It's interesting to hear your perspective because I usually hear either a perspective of somebody who's like Israeli Jewish or somebody who understands what the Israel apartheid is, but they're not necessarily Jewish. But it's interesting to hear your perspective from somebody who would kind of have the experiences and can speak to what makes Bernie's advocacy and then the condemnation of Ilhan Omar, so important to discuss. Right. So thank you for coming on, Katie. I greatly appreciate it. Where can people find you at?
On Twitter, I'm Katie Halps, which is letter K, letter T, HALPS. My Patreon is patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And I have a katiehalper.com. I'm filling it. And my podcast is on SoundCloud and iTunes. And I'm going to start doing more videos. So I'm going to ask you for your help with that too.
Nice. All right. Sounds good. For everybody else, thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure that you subscribe, hit that like button, share the video, turn on that notification bell, by the way, because like I said, I know a lot of people have been saying they haven't been getting notifications. So you might not even be subscribed. They do that a lot when it comes to progressive channels. You all know this. But more than anything else, always remember, find your balance. Peace.